Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about what is physiology, and we're going to talk about the differences between negative and positive feedback loops. Physiology is all about the mechanism, how things work, not really the why part. Because when you ask why, that's not going to tell you really how things work. So, for example, if you are asking why do red blood cells transport oxygen, your answer is going to be because your body cells need oxygen, so therefore the red blood cells are going to be bringing the oxygen to those cells. But that doesn't really answer the question, okay, how are the red blood cells going to transport oxygen? And physiology is all about answering the how question. So how do red blood cells transport oxygen? Well, the oxygen is going to bind to a certain protein in your red blood cells known as hemoglobin. And that's how oxygen is going to be carried within your red blood cells, and eventually it's going to be transported to go to the body cells and to all of your body regions that need that oxygen. So when we are studying physiology, that's what we are really going to study. We are going to study the mechanisms that are taking place inside of your body, and basically it's the how of everything, how everything works inside of you. That's what physiology is all about. Some important themes in physiology that we are going to explore later during the semester. One is structure and function are closely related, or we can say structure determines the function. For example, in our body, we have so many different types of proteins, and proteins are made out of amino acids. The protein found in your red blood cells is known as the hemoglobin protein, and that's the protein that would help you carry oxygen. The hemoglobin protein is made out of amino acids. If one of those amino acids is missing, then the structure of your hemoglobin protein is going to it's going to differ, and so therefore the hemoglobin protein is not going to function properly, and that can actually lead to sickle cell anemia. Another important theme is living organisms need energy for reproduction, for growth, for movement, for survival. And so we're going to talk about how ATP is produced within our body. Another theme is how our DNA is basically our blueprint, and it's what's carrying all of the information. And so therefore, if our DNA gets mutated, basically it changes how that can affect the functions of so many things within our body. Another theme, and that's what we're going to mainly focus on today, is the idea of homeostasis. Homeo actually means similar, and stasis means condition. So homeostasis is the condition of basically staying internally stabilized, meaning that we have to for a lot of things within our body, it has to stay within a normal range. So when you think of your temperature, you need to stay within a normal range. Your temperature cannot increase too much, and it cannot decrease too much. Otherwise, we could either go into like hypothermia, or we could, if you get a high fever, that high fever can start basically melting your proteins. And so we always want to stay within that normal range. Another thing that we also want to keep stabilized internally is our blood pressure. same idea. You want to always stay within that normal range. So it's always a range, like there isn't a specific number. So for blood pressure, it's not like if you're not 120/80, then you're not at a homeostasis level. So it's never just one, specific number. It's always a range. So as long as you are within the normal range, you are okay. And that's why whenever you do, for example, a blood test, you would notice that they always have a range. And as long as you are within the range, then you are fine. So as I said, things like temperature, things like blood pressure, all of these, and of course, like, there's so many different examples, like hormones. You want to always have the normal range production of those hormones. And all of this is basically going to determine whether we are going to survive or not. So if we are not able to maintain our temperature or our blood pressure, etc., within that normal range, we are definitely going to have disorders and diseases, and it can even lead to fatality. So when we think of homeostasis, as I said, we want to stay stably internally stabilized. And now throughout our day, though, we are going to be faced with changes. So again, as I said, there is a normal range for our body temperature, but throughout the day, you might get hot, you might get cold, so your temperature is actually going to start fluctuating. And that is fine as long as your body is able to, again, keep you within that normal range. And as long as your body is quickly able to, as I said, like either increase your temperature or decrease it to maintain that normal range for you. Now, those changes that you might face could be external changes, like the weather is too hot or it's too cold. So those are external changes. Or it could be internal changes. Something inside of you, let's say, is not functioning properly, and so you are facing some internal changes inside of your body. Whether it's an internal change or an external change, your body needs to be able to, first of all, sense that there is a change taking place, and your body needs to attempt to compensate and basically keep you within the normal range. Now, if your body fails, it cannot, keep you within that normal range, then either we are going to fall ill or we are going to start having certain disorders. And this is sometimes what happens when an individual, something goes wrong with their gland, let's say, and their gland is not producing that hormone, and so your hormone level drops dramatically, and there is no way for your body to go ahead and maintain that hormone level anymore because the gland is not functioning properly. You would start having certain disorders, like some individuals have thyroid disorders because their thyroid gland was either producing too much of the thyroid hormone or too little of it, and the body could not bring the hormone back to its normal level, and so they end up with basically thyroid disorder. Same thing, like with diabetic patients who their pancreas is not producing, let's say they are type 1, their pancreas is not producing any more insulin. So their insulin levels are, again, out of that normal range, and so they would start developing basically diabetes. Now, if your body is able to succeed and keep you within that normal range, then of course this is how wellness is going to be achieved, and this is how we are going to survive. Now, there are feedback loops, and we are going to talk about two feedback loops. One is known as a negative feedback loop, and the other one is known as a positive feedback loop. Now, the negative feedback loop, we refer to them, those loops, we refer to them as homeostatic loops, because those loops are always trying to bring you back to that normal range. Positive feedback loops, those are not homeostatic loops. They are actually going to do the opposite. They are going to push you further away from that normal range. So let's start with the negative feedback loops that are homeostatic. What happens is you're first faced with a stimulus, which is basically a change. As I said, that change could either be external or internal. Once you're faced with that change, your body's going to sense it, and your body's going to start to respond to that change. Now, in a negative feedback loop, your body is going to try to decrease that change. It's basically going to try to counteract it. And by counteracting it, your body is going to try to stop that stimulus. And so therefore, it's going to shut off the loop. That's basically what a negative feedback loop is. You're trying to counteract that change that you are facing to bring yourself back to that homeostatic normal range level. On the other hand, the positive feedback loop, when you are faced with a change and your body tries to respond to it, the thing is that a response is actually going to reinforce the stimulus. It's going to reinforce that change that you are facing. So it's not going to, that response that your body is going to be going through is not to remove that change, like remove that stimulus or even decrease it. On the other hand, it's trying to reinforce it, and that's going to send you further away from the normal value. It's going to send you away from that homeostatic normal range that we were talking about. And so the thing is, the cycle is going to keep going, like your body's going to keep moving you further away from that normal range. And so really to stop it, to stop that loop, you need an outside intervention. So let's go ahead and check out examples for both of them. Let's start off with the negative feedback loop. And as I said, the negative feedback loop, it's a homeostatic loop because the response is trying to counteract that change that you are faced with, and it's trying to decrease it instead of reinforcing it. So let's take a look right here. Let's say that we are talking about our blood glucose levels. So as I said, for almost everything, we do have a normal range, including our blood glucose levels. So we do have a normal range of how much glucose we should have in our blood. Let's say that the amount of glucose in your blood has started to increase. Now your body is going to sense that, and your pancreas is going to get the signal that there's too much sugar in your blood. So your the cells in your pancreas gland, known as the beta cells, those beta cells are actually going to start releasing insulin in response to the high glucose levels in your blood. And so what's going to happen is the effectors, those are basically the cells that are going to respond, they are going to use the insulin to help them absorb the sugar out of the blood and into the cells. So basically, by releasing insulin, your cells are going to have the ability to absorb that sugar out of the blood. And so once the cells start to absorb the sugar out of the blood, what's going to happen to the amount of sugar in your blood? Well, it's going to start to drop. So notice how the change that you were faced with was high blood glucose levels, but after you've released the insulin, your glucose levels in your blood has dropped. So notice how you are counteracting the change, and how you are not reinforcing it. On the other hand, you are actually trying to decrease it. And so by dropping your blood glucose level, you are basically going to shut down that loop, because you've brought it down to the normal levels that you are after. So that's why we refer to the negative feedback loops as homeostatic feedback loops, because they're always trying to counteract the change, and they're always trying to bring you back to that normal range. Or instead of calling it normal range, you can call it your normal set point. Same thing. As I said, a positive feedback loop is not a homeostatic loop, because it's actually going to try to push you away from that normal range. And so whatever change you're going to be faced with, it's actually going to try to reinforce it. And it's going to try to even increase that change that you are faced with. So an example of a positive feedback loop is what happens during delivery. So during delivery, when the baby is about to be delivered, the baby is going to start pushing against the cervix of the mom. When the baby's head, as you can see, when the baby's head starts to push against the cervix, what happens is your brain is going to start sending signals to release oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone. Once oxytocin is released, what oxytocin is going to do is it's going to start to increase your uterine contractions, and it's going to further stretch the cervix. So notice how we are not trying to stop the cervix from stretching. On the other hand, the positive feedback loop is actually trying to increase that change, and it's trying to increase and further stretch out the cervix. And so that response is going to keep increasing, and the oxytocin is going to keep getting released, and the cervix is going to stretch out more, and the uterus is going to contract even more. And so notice how we're moving away from that normal range. The normal range is your uterus is not supposed to contract, and your cervix is not really supposed to stretch that much, or not even at all if you're not having a delivery. And so in this case, your body's trying to do the opposite. Your body's trying to stretch out the cervix more, increase your contractions more, pushing you away from that normal range that we were talking about, basically to help you deliver the baby. And so that cycle is going to keep going, like the whole stretching of your uterus and your cervix is going to keep going. The contractions of your uterus and the stretching of your cervix until the baby is delivered. So what's going to stop the cycle, what's going to stop that positive feedback loop in this example, is the baby being delivered. Once the baby is delivered, that's it. No more oxytocin is going to be released, and so the uterine contractions are going to stop, and the cervix eventually, it's going to go back to its normal size, and it's not going to be stretched out anymore. So as you can see, the positive feedback loop, it was not trying to make you go back to that homeostatic normal range. So check out those examples and try to figure out whether they are negative or positive feedback loop. Lactation is when a mom is nursing her baby. So if you think about it, when the baby is sucking on the breast tissue, that motion right there is actually sending a signal from the brain to actually produce a hormone that would allow the milk to continue being released, and another hormone is actually also going to be released to help the milk get ejected. So as long as the baby is, is getting nursed and the baby is getting the milk, then the process is going to continue until the baby basically stops feeding. And so lactation then has to be a positive feedback loop. Thermoregulation, if you're too hot, your body's going to try to, it's going to send signals to your sweat glands so that you can sweat. And so therefore, your body's going to try to cool you down. And so therefore, it's a negative feedback loop. If you're too cold, your body's going to send a signal to your muscles to make you shiver, and so therefore you're going to increase your body temperature. So it's definitely a negative feedback loop because you're always trying to counteract the change. Blood clotting. Now, blood clotting is the clotting process. I'm not asking whether your blood, let's say you've injured yourself, I'm not asking whether you've stopped your bleeding. I'm asking about the clotting process itself. So the clotting process itself, if you are injured, the clotting process is actually going to keep increasing because your body is trying to clot your blood to stop your bleeding. So the clotting process itself is actually positive because you're going to continue to increase those clotting factors at a high rate to make sure that you've sealed, you've internally sealed that wound to stop your bleeding.